The sun blazed high above, casting a golden glow over the beach as the sound of waves gently kissed the shore. Families, tourists, and surfers reveled in the perfect summer day. Kids ran in the sand, their laughter mingling with the cries of seagulls, while others lounged on towels, enjoying the warmth. It was an idyllic picture of relaxation. But for Karen, it was a day that threatened everything she held dear. As she made her way down the beach, her sunglasses perched firmly on her nose, she reveled in the tranquility that she believed should be her birthright. The exclusive, quiet beach community was her sanctuary, an oasis free from the noise and chaos of the outside world. Here, the only sounds that should fill the air were the gentle lapping of the surf and the occasional murmur of a distant conversation. Nothing more. Then, the music started. At first it was just a few strums, soft and distant. But as she approached the shoreline, the unmistakable sound of mariachi music filled the air, its lively rhythm cutting through the calm. It was a sound that, to Karen's ears, felt completely out of place, like a wild cacophony intruding on her perfect day. The trumpet blared. The guitar strummed. The violin played a spirited tune. Each note danced on the wind like an unwelcome guest. Karen stopped in her tracks, her heart rate quickening. It was louder now, unmistakably present, and undeniably festive. A group of beachgoers were gathered near the water, clapping along to the music, some of them even dancing in the sand. The Mariachi band, dressed in their traditional churro suits, played with a passion that was evident in every note, their music flowing effortlessly across the beach. Karen's eyes narrowed. How dare they? She had lived in the exclusive beachfront community for years and had worked hard to cultivate a sense of serenity and order. The idea that these loud, boisterous strangers could simply waltz in and disturb her peace filled her with fury. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her beach tote, and a bead of sweat dripped down her temple, though it wasn't the heat that made her skin prickle. No, it was the audacity. Karen couldn't help but feel her blood boil as the music swelled. She glanced around, searching for someone else who might be as upset as she was. The older couple beside her exchanged smiles, their heads nodding to the beat of the music. Nearby, a group of teenagers were laughing, clearly enjoying the show. No one seemed to care. But Karen did. She cared deeply. Her steps quickened as she made her way closer to the source of the noise. The band, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued their performance, lost in the music and the atmosphere they had helped create. The guitarist's fingers flew across the strings, the trumpeter's notes sharp and clear, while the violinist's bow danced gracefully in the air. Karen's eyes fixed on the band leader, who smiled broadly as he played, the sun glinting off his ornate hat. Something snapped within her. Without a second thought, Karen marched forward, her expression tight with determination. She wasn't about to let these performers turn her peaceful day into chaos. But as she drew closer, she couldn't help but notice the crowd around the band. They were not just enjoying the music, they were celebrating it. Some were swaying, some dancing. A few were even gathering around the band, holding up their phones to capture the moment. Why weren't they stopping? She thought, her anger rising. Why wasn't anyone bothered by this? Her hand shot up, gesturing toward the band in an almost accusatory manner. The music seemed to swell as she approached, amplifying the sense of tension that suddenly gripped her. She took a deep breath. There was no way she was letting this go. Not today. Not on her watch. And with that, Karen's confrontation was about to begin. Karen's eyes darted from the band to the people around her, each one seemingly lost in the joy of the music. A cold sense of disbelief washed over her. How could they be so oblivious? She wasn't just annoyed now. She was insulted. This wasn't some impromptu performance. This was an organized event, and it was too loud. Her gaze hardened as she took in the sight of the band, still playing with abandon, oblivious to her frustration. The guitarist's fingers danced across the strings with such grace, it almost seemed like a mocking performance. The trumpet blared its brass tones, filling the air with sound that threatened to tear apart the calm she so desperately craved. She spun on her heel, her mind already racing, as the anger inside her twisted tighter. There was no way she was going to let this go. Not here. Not now. Her pace quickened as she strode off toward the beachside cafe, where a small office for the local HOA was located. The sounds of the mariachi band seemed to mock her every step, growing louder in her ears as she distanced herself. The rising crescendo of their music was like a bitter sting, one that fed her growing need to regain control. This was her beach, her community, and she wouldn't let anyone disrupt it. By the time she reached the small office, the rhythmic beat of the music still lingered in her ears, like an irritating itch she couldn't scratch. The glass doors of the HOA office stood before her, clear and sterile, just like the community she believed in. She pushed them open with a sense of purpose, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Inside, the receptionist, a young woman with a bright smile, looked up at Karen with polite curiosity. Karen was known here. Everyone knew her. She was a fixture in the neighborhood, someone whose opinions carried weight. The receptionist's gaze faltered slightly as she recognized Karen's expression. "Hello, Karen. How can I help you today?" the receptionist asked, her voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. Karen didn't waste time with pleasantries. Her words came out in a rush, her frustration pouring through every syllable. "I need you to do something about that mariachi band on the beach," she demanded, voice rising with intensity. "They're making a scene, disturbing the peace. It's too loud, and it's completely inappropriate for this community. You have to stop them." The receptionist blinked, taken aback by the urgency in Karen's tone. "I'm sorry, but I don't think the band is doing anything wrong," she began carefully. "They've got a permit, and there." "I don't care about their permit," Karen interrupted, her voice now sharp with authority. "This is my beach, my neighborhood, and they are disturbing the peace. You have to stop them. Now." The receptionist hesitated, glancing down at the desk where the complaint forms sat neatly stacked. "Okay, I'll let Mr. Hamilton know right away. He's the HOA president, and he can look into it." Karen didn't wait for another second. She nodded curtly and turned on her heel, her heart racing with the anticipation of what would come next. She felt certain the HOA would back her up. After all, they always had. They'd listen to her, just like they always did. But deep down, something gnawed at her. What if they didn't? She pushed the thought aside. The HOA president would understand. He had to. He'd seen her as a voice of reason in the community for years. There was no way he would let this band ruin the atmosphere that had been carefully cultivated in their exclusive, pristine neighborhood. As she exited the office, she glanced back toward the beach. The mariachi music echoed faintly, but she didn't flinch. This was just the beginning. Karen was already imagining the formal complaint she would file, the legal threats she'd make. And yet, beneath the surface of her growing anger, a small, flickering thought remained. What if they don't stop? The uncertainty lingered, but it didn't matter. The wheels were in motion, and Karen wouldn't back down. Not now. Not when the music was threatening to shatter everything she held dear. The faint strains of the mariachi band echoed in Karen's mind as she made her way home, the images of the beach and the lively crowd still playing out in her head. She felt an unsettling knot in her stomach, a mixture of frustration and uncertainty, but she quickly dismissed it. The HOA would come through. They always did. At home, Karen paced back and forth in her spacious living room, her fingers tapping impatiently on the arm of her chair. The crisp, white walls of her modern house were a reflection of the life she had built. Clean, orderly, and perfectly controlled. She'd spent years cultivating this image of calm, exclusivity, and above all, peace. The mariachi music was a direct assault on that peace, and Karen wasn't about to let anyone ruin what she had worked so hard for. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a message from Mrs. Hamilton, the HOA president's wife. confirming that Karen's complaint had been received and would be forwarded to the board for review. Karen's heart surged with a sense of satisfaction. Finally. But as she read the message, a strange unease crept over her. Mrs. Hamilton's text was polite, but it lacked the urgency Karen had expected. Was she taking this seriously? Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but she quickly shoved the thought aside. She would get the result she wanted. She had to. As the hours passed, she found herself growing restless. Every few minutes, she checked her phone for updates. The Mariachi band was still playing on the beach, of that she was sure. She could hear faint echoes of the music even from the comfort of her home. It was maddening. Her fingers drummed against her phone, waiting for the notification that would signal the HOA's action. Finally, the call came. It was Mr. Hamilton himself, the HOA president. His voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. "Karen," he began, "I just wanted to let you know we've looked into the matter. The band has a permit to perform, and there's really nothing we can do about it. The city has approved the event." A sick feeling twisted in Karen's stomach. She felt a cold shock run through her, a rising panic that she quickly tried to suppress. This wasn't the answer she had expected. "What do you mean, nothing you can do?" she snapped, her voice a little sharper than she intended. "This is a violation of the peace and quiet of this neighborhood. It's loud, disruptive, and completely out of place. You're telling me the HOA is just going to let them continue?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. "Karen, I understand your concerns, but the beach is a public space. The band is within their rights. I know it's not ideal, but we can't override a city-approved permit. I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do." Her heart pounded. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The HOA had always backed her up before. They'd never let anything disrupt the peace of their community. This was supposed to be their fight, not just hers. Karen gripped the phone tighter, her nails digging into her palm. "You have to do something," she said, her voice low and trembling with frustration. "Call the police. I'll take it to court if I have to. This can't continue." Mr. Hamilton's voice softened, almost sympathetically. "Karen, I know this is frustrating, but you've got to let it go. Trust me, the band isn't going to cause any lasting harm. Please try to relax." Relax. The word hit her like a slap. Relax. The band was taking over her beach, her sanctuary, and the HOA was doing nothing about it. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she could do next. The police. A lawsuit. A protest. Anything to stop them. "I'm not backing down," she said through gritted teeth, already making plans in her head. "I'll make sure this stops, no matter what it takes." The line went quiet as Mr. Hamilton hesitated. Then he sighed again. "I'm sorry, Karen. I really am. But if you're going to take this further, I can't be a part of it. I'm afraid you'll have to go through the city council. They're the ones who approved this." The line clicked as he ended the call, leaving Karen standing there, fuming, her thoughts spinning faster than she could grasp them. Her anger, her frustration, everything felt out of control now. What now? The idea of surrendering to the situation made her stomach churn, but the thought of letting the band continue to play was even worse. She would not give in. There had to be another way to stop them. There had to be. And that was when she began to consider the one thing she had been trying so hard to avoid: going directly to the authorities. Karen stood frozen in her living room, the weight of Mr. Hamilton's words still hanging in the air like a thick fog. The notion of giving up was unthinkable. How could she? She had worked too hard for too long to let some mariachi band trample over her carefully cultivated life. Her gaze flitted to the beach below, where she could just make out the figures of the band members, their instruments glinting in the sunlight. The sound of their music seemed to pierce the stillness of her house, mocking her every step. This wasn't over. Without a second thought, Karen grabbed her phone and dialed the police, her fingers trembling with determination. She wasn't about to let this become some trivial battle she could walk away from. She wasn't just a homeowner in a peaceful neighborhood. She was a force to be reckoned with. The phone rang, and as the seconds stretched on, she could almost feel the band's music thumping through her veins, like a challenge she couldn't back down from. Finally, a calm voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need help, Karen said, her voice sharper than she intended. There's a mariachi band on the beach, and they're making too much noise. It's disrupting the peace, and the HOA can't do anything about it. I want them stopped immediately. The dispatcher's response was professional, but Karen could hear the slight hesitation in the voice on the other end. Ma'am, the beach is a public space. Unless there's a violation, there's not much we can do. Karen's eyes narrowed as she gripped the phone tighter. They're disturbing the peace. It's too loud. I've already spoken to the HOA, but they're useless. I demand someone come and handle this. The dispatcher paused, then sighed. I'll send an officer to assess the situation, but I can't promise anything. Thank you, Karen snapped, hanging up with a sense of finality. She stood by the window, watching the band's joyful celebration continue on the beach. The crowd had grown. People were clapping, dancing, and even singing along. The mariachi music, once an unwelcome intrusion, now seemed to have claimed the beach as its own. She could see the smiles on the faces of the people around her, their carefree attitude only deepening her sense of injustice. Her thoughts began to race. She wasn't going to let this go. The police would handle it. They had to. Minutes passed like hours. The music on the beach continued to swell, creating an eerie tension in the air. Karen's mind kept circling back to one fact. The band was still there. Their music refused to stop. The more she thought about it, the more her frustration burned. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They had no idea what they had started by defying her wishes. Finally, the police car appeared at the edge of the beach, its siren a distant echo that sent a shiver through Karen. She watched as an officer stepped out, surveying the scene. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She couldn't help but feel a small, bitter thrill rise within her. The officer would come over, assess the noise level, and tell the band to pack up. But something unexpected happened. Rather than immediately approaching the band, the officer stood at the edge of the crowd for several long seconds. His hand hovered near his radio, but he didn't make any move to speak to anyone. The band, still lost in their performance, seemed completely unaware of his presence. The tension in Karen's chest grew, the suspense becoming unbearable. Why wasn't he doing anything? She pressed her hand to the glass window, her breath fogging up the surface. What was taking so long? The officer's indecision gnawed at her, and she began to feel a strange sense of unease. Finally, the officer walked toward the band, but his approach was measured, calm, almost respectful. Karen's lips tightened as she saw him speak to the guitarist, his tone friendly, even slightly amused. The guitarist nodded, as though agreeing to something. Then, to Karen's surprise, the officer turned and began to walk away, waving his hand in a gesture of peace toward the crowd. What was happening? The mariachi music continued, louder now, more defiant than ever. Karen could hardly believe what she was witnessing. The officer wasn't stopping them. The crowd cheered. It was a slap in the face. Her grip on the window tightened until her knuckles turned white. The officer had let them off the hook. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, each exhale like a whisper of defeat. But the fire inside her didn't die. It only grew stronger. As the officer disappeared into the distance, his back to her, Karen made her decision. She wasn't just going to sit back and accept this. Her fingers flew to her phone once more, dialing the number of the HOA again. If the authorities wouldn't help, maybe the HOA would listen to reason. They had to. But deep down she knew this fight was far from over. Karen's pulse raced as she hung up the phone with the HOA once again. She had demanded, pleaded, and even threatened. Yet the response was always the same. The band had the right to perform. The officers hadn't stepped in. No one seemed to take her seriously. The piece of her perfect, exclusive community was slipping away, and it was all because of those people on the beach. Her hands shook as she set the phone down, but there was no time to wallow in defeat. If the HOA and the police weren't going to help her, Karen knew what she had to do. She was the community's voice. She had been a trusted member of the HOA for years, a fixture of order and control in this idyllic neighborhood. If she couldn't count on the authorities, then she would take matters into her own hands. Her mind churned as she strode toward the door, her every step deliberate, calculated. She couldn't just sit in her house fuming. No, she needed to make her presence felt on that beach. She needed to show everyone just how serious she was. The band would not be allowed to stay. Karen stepped out into the hot afternoon sun, the air thick with the salty scent of the sea. The sounds of the Mariachi band reached her ears as she approached the beach, their music mocking her with every note. The crescendo of trumpets, the rapid strumming of guitars, it all blended together into an unbearable storm in her mind. She could see the band in the distance, still surrounded by a growing crowd of onlookers, the energy of the performance building with each passing minute. How could they be so carefree? Karen thought, her vision narrowing as she walked toward them. This was no longer just a matter of noise. This was about control. This was about respect. And she would not be disrespected. When Karen reached the edge of the crowd, she took a deep breath, collecting herself. Her eyes locked onto the band's leader, the man who had smiled at her as he strummed his guitar earlier, like he was daring her to do something about it. His hat gleamed in the sun as he played with abandon, his fingers a blur on the strings. She approached him quickly, pushing through the group of people that had gathered, their bodies swaying to the rhythm of the music. The crowd parted slightly, as though they sensed her purpose, her intensity. Her stomach churned with anticipation, but her expression remained steely, unreadable. "Hey!" Karen's voice cut through the music, sharp and commanding. The band stopped mid-song, all eyes turning toward her in surprise. The air seemed to freeze for a split second, as though time itself had taken a pause. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she faced the mariachi leader. The crowd hushed, the once loud rhythms of the instruments now silent. "I've had enough of this noise," she said, her voice dripping with authority. "You need to pack up and leave. Now." The guitarist blinked, taken aback. "Madam," he began, his voice calm and polite, but there was a hint of disbelief in his tone. "We have a permit to perform here. This is a public beach." "I don't care about your permit," Karen snapped, cutting him off. "This is my community, and I won't let you ruin it. You're disturbing the peace. The people here have the right to enjoy their day without being subjected to this racket." She glanced around at the faces of the onlookers. Some of them had begun to murmur, exchanging glances and whispering behind their hands. Others stood silently, watching Karen with curiosity, but none of them spoke up to challenge her. The guitarist exchanged a look with his bandmates, his face unreadable. Then, after what seemed like an eternity of tension, he turned his gaze back to Karen. His expression was serious now, but there was no sign of fear. He wasn't going to back down so easily. "Madam, we're just doing our job," he said quietly, his voice now laced with a quiet resolve. "We have every right to be here, just as you do. No one is forcing you to stay and listen. We're bringing joy to these people." Joy? The word struck Karen like a slap, but her mind was too far gone, too consumed with the need to control this situation. She wasn't going to let this man lecture her. She was right. She was the one who mattered here. "Joy," Karen repeated coldly, her eyes narrowing. "This is a disruption, and I'm putting an end to it. Pack up your things. Now." The crowd shifted, some stepping back, others leaning in, eager to see how this confrontation would unfold. The mariachi band stood firm, their instruments still in hand. Karen's frustration flared, her vision narrowing to the face of the guitarist. They couldn't defy her. Not here. Not now. But what happened next would send shockwaves through her carefully constructed world. The standoff between Karen and the Mariachi band seemed to stretch forever. The band stood motionless, their instruments still in their hands, but their gazes now sharpened, locking on Karen. The crowd around them seemed to hold its collective breath, as though waiting for the next move. Karen's heart hammered in her chest, her mind racing with the knowledge that she couldn't afford to back down now. This was it. She had made her stand, and there was no turning back. She had confronted the band head-on, made her demand, and the power she had over her neighborhood, over the peace she had fought so hard to preserve, was about to be reaffirmed. But the guitarist wasn't backing down. His gaze remained steady, his posture unwavering. His lips parted, but Karen was quick to cut him off again. "Don't you dare argue with me. Pack up, or I'll call the police again. I'm not joking this time." For a split second, the guitarist seemed to hesitate, but then he nodded slightly. Karen allowed herself a moment of triumph. The battle was almost over. She had won. But then, just as she began to relax, a voice rang out from behind her. "Is everything all right here?" Karen's spine stiffened. She turned, her eyes narrowing as she saw a figure approaching from the crowd. It was a young man in his 20s, wearing a t-shirt and shorts, with a confident swagger to his step. His face was flushed from the sun, and his eyes gleamed with an almost mischievous energy. "I hope you're not causing trouble," the young man said, his voice smooth, but with an edge of sarcasm that immediately set Karen on edge. "What's the problem? A little mariachi music too much for you?" Karen's blood ran cold as she recognized him. Max, the son of one of her neighbors, the very same man who had been caught throwing loud parties in the community before, completely disregarding the HOA rules. Max was known for causing trouble, and Karen had spent years trying to keep him in line. He had no respect for the rules, for the peace of their community. Karen's jaw tightened, and she fought the urge to snap at him. Instead, she took a deep breath, putting on her most authoritative voice. "Max, this is none of your business," she said coldly. "These people are causing a disturbance. I'm asking them to leave." Max raised an eyebrow, a playful grin spreading across his face. "Really?" he said, looking over at the band. "From the way I see it, they're just playing music, and the people here are actually enjoying it. It's a public beach, Karen. You can't just tell people what to do." Karen felt her frustration surge again, but now it wasn't just the band who was defying her. It was Max too. He was taunting her, undermining her authority in front of everyone. This wasn't supposed to happen. "I don't need you to lecture me," Karen hissed, her voice low but laced with venom. "This is about the peace of the neighborhood. These people are disrupting it." Max shrugged, unfazed. "Maybe you need to loosen up a bit, Karen." His eyes flicked to the band, who were still standing quietly, waiting for the next move. "They'd got a permit, they'd got a crowd, and you're standing here trying to shut it all down. Maybe you're the one causing the disturbance." Karen's face reddened. Every word Max said stung, and deep down, she knew there was some truth to his accusation. But she couldn't let him see her falter. She wouldn't let him win. "I will not stand by and let this continue," she spat, stepping toward him. "This neighborhood is mine to protect, and I'll do whatever it takes to stop this chaos." Max chuckled darkly. "Is that so?" His voice dropped, an almost imperceptible edge to it now. "Then I guess you don't mind when people start taking pictures of you, do you?" Karen froze, her heart stopping in her chest. She could feel her face pale, the blood draining from her skin. Max had already pulled out his phone, and as he snapped a picture of her, she realized with horror that he was recording everything, her confrontation with the band, her threats, everything. A wave of dread washed over her, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch out. She could already hear the whispers in the crowd, the rumors that would spread through the neighborhood. If this footage got out, her carefully constructed image as the HOA enforcer would be shattered. Her authority would be questioned. She couldn't let that happen. But it was too late. Max turned his phone toward her, showing her the image he had captured. "Don't worry, Karen. This'll make a great story for the neighborhood Facebook group. Maybe we can get some opinions on who's really disturbing the peace around here." The color drained from Karen's face as the weight of the situation settled in. This was no longer just about the Mariachi band. It was about her reputation, her control, and the power she thought she had. And in one moment, it was all slipping away. Karen's heart hammered in her chest as Max waved his phone in front of her face, showing off the video he had just captured. Her worst nightmare was unfolding before her eyes. The camera's lens had caught her every harsh word, every command, every flicker of impatience as she confronted the band and the crowd. Max's mocking smile only deepened the pit in her stomach. She had always prided herself on her ability to maintain control, but now, in front of an audience, that control was slipping through her fingers like sand. Max stepped back, the grin on his face widening. "Don't worry, Karen. I'm sure the neighbors will love seeing how you treat people." His voice was dripping with sarcasm, and Karen could hear the murmur of approval from some of the onlookers. It was as if they, too, were relishing in her discomfort. For the first time in years, Karen felt vulnerable, exposed. She desperately scanned the crowd, hoping to find someone, anyone, who might come to her defense. But the faces around her were a mixture of curiosity and judgment, and she could feel the shift in the air. The once friendly, tight-knit community she had cultivated was now turning on her. "Max, you're making a mistake," Karen said, her voice trembling slightly. She tried to push the panic down, but it was there, coursing through her like electricity. "You don't understand what you're doing. You're making a spectacle out of nothing." But Max wasn't listening. He was already typing something into his phone, no doubt about to upload the video to social media. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The thought of the entire neighborhood seeing her lose control, watching as she threatened a group of musicians and made a fool of herself, was unbearable. It could destroy everything: her standing in the HOA, her reputation in the community, even her own sense of self. "Here, let's make this public, shall we?" Max's voice was smug, almost triumphant as he hit post. A notification pinged as the video uploaded, and Karen could feel her world crumbling around her. The damage was done. As if the universe were conspiring against her, the band leader, who had remained eerily silent up until now, suddenly spoke up, his voice steady and calm. "Ma'am," he began, his tone respectful, but tinged with a quiet authority. "I think it's time for us to leave. This is clearly not a good environment for us to continue playing in." Karen froze, the sting of his words cutting deeper than any insult Max could have hurled. She had pushed them to the edge, and now they were walking away. She had done it. Her persistence, her insistence on being right, had cost her the one thing she was trying to protect. The band was leaving, and not just them. The respect, the trust, it was all leaving with them. The crowd around her began to disperse, some shaking their heads, others casting sympathetic glances in her direction, but no one spoke up. The music that had once filled the air with laughter and joy had now faded into an uncomfortable silence, leaving only the sound of her rapid breathing. The weight of the situation crashed down on her like a tidal wave. Max's voice cut through the quiet, his tone suddenly more serious. "Karen, you can't control everything. Sometimes you've got to let go." His words felt like a slap in the face. She couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened with a mix of rage, humiliation, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The reality was setting in. "I don't have to let go," she whispered, almost to herself. But the words were hollow. She had spent years building her image, crafting the life she had always dreamed of. She had made it all about control, her rules, her neighborhood, her peace. But now it seemed as if she had lost it all in a single careless moment. She looked around at the retreating figures of the band, their instruments packed up, their heads bowed as they left. Karen's legs felt weak as she watched them walk away. But it wasn't just them. She was walking away too. She had lost, and there was nothing left to do but face the consequences. Max's words echoed in her mind, a cruel reminder of everything she had tried to avoid. He was right. She couldn't control everything. And yet, even as she stood there, her world falling apart, Karen refused to accept defeat. She had one more move, one last chance to save face. She turned back toward the crowd, her voice sharp as she called out. "You haven't heard the last of this," she declared, her words cold and cutting. "This is not over." But deep down, she knew it was. Karen's last words hung in the air, sharp and defiant. But even as they escaped her lips, she knew they were meaningless. The damage was done. Max's video was out there, circulating through the community like wildfire. The perfect image of authority she had so carefully curated had cracked wide open. And now, there was no hiding the truth. As the last of the crowd dispersed, some murmuring amongst themselves, others casting pitying glances in her direction, Karen stood frozen. Her chest tightened with a mix of dread and frustration. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. She had always been in control of the HOA, of the neighborhood, of her life. But now it felt as if all that control had slipped through her fingers like water. She took a shaky breath, scanning the beach one last time. The Mariachi band was long gone, and with them, the last vestiges of her dignity seemed to vanish into the ocean breeze. The gentle sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed almost mocking now, as though the world was telling her that all her efforts had been for nothing. Just as Karen turned to leave, a voice called out from behind her, stopping her dead in her tracks. "Karen." Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the voice instantly. It was Pam, the HOA president, and one of Karen's staunchest allies in the past. But now, there was no mistaking the tone in Pam's voice. It was laced with something that Karen couldn't quite place. Disappointment, maybe. Concern. Whatever it was, it made her stomach churn. Pam stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her face a mixture of disbelief and concern. "I saw the video," Pam said, her voice quieter than usual. I don't know what to say." Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry. She could feel her palms beginning to sweat. "Not Pam. Not now." "Pam, Karen began, but Pam raised her hand, cutting her off. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Karen," Pam said firmly, her eyes narrowing. "I've known you for years, and I've always respected the work you've done in this neighborhood. But what you did today, what you did to those people, to the community, I can't ignore it." Karen's heart sank. The weight of Pam's words settled on her like a stone, and for the first time, Karen felt truly exposed. There were no more defenses left. The perfect image of control of the HOA enforcer had been shattered by her own actions. And now, the people she had relied on, the people who had stood by her for so long, were starting to see her for who she really was. I only wanted to protect the peace," Karen said, her voice weak, her resolve crumbling. "I just wanted to make sure this neighborhood didn't get out of hand." Pam shook her head slowly, her expression softening, but the disappointment was still there. "Karen, the world isn't as simple as rules and control. People deserve to be heard, to have their own space, their own joy." She paused, and for a moment, Karen could see a flicker of sadness in Pam's eyes. "I thought you understood that, but after what happened today, I'm not so sure anymore." The silence between them felt heavy. The air seemed thick with the weight of their unspoken words. I don't know what to do," Karen admitted quietly, the fight completely gone from her voice. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to lose everything this way. Pam sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Maybe you don't need to do anything. Maybe you just need to listen." Karen's breath caught in her throat. Pam's words were like a final blow, a reminder that all the control, all the power, meant nothing if you couldn't connect with people, if you couldn't empathize with their needs. As Karen stood there, her mind racing. She saw her reflection in a nearby window, the once dominant figure, now a woman broken by her own pride. She had always believed she could control everything. But the truth was, she had been controlling nothing but her own destruction. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. The message from the neighborhood group chat was undeniable. "Karen, we've decided it's time for new leadership." The text from the HOA board was blunt and final. There was no room for negotiation. No matter how much she had fought for control, it was slipping away, piece by piece. A cold wave of realization hit Karen. Her time in power was over. As she stood on that quiet beach, surrounded by the remains of her pride, Karen realized that she had two choices. She could fight this, try to salvage what little reputation she had left, or she could walk away, accept that her desire for control had ultimately led her to ruin. But as the waves crashed one final time, Karen knew there was only one choice left. She was done fighting. The peace she had tried so desperately to protect had eluded her all along. And now, all she could do was let go.